In the journey of life, family relationships are often the intersection of love and responsibility. Yet they sometimes conceal complex emotions that are difficult to articulate. There are stories that not only challenge the strength of these bonds but also provoke deep reflections on boundaries and ethics. One such story revolves around the sensitive situation of a father-in-law expressing his emotions towards his daughter-in-law, a scenario that shocks and unsettles those involved while raising difficult questions about how to face and navigate family dynamics. Let us delve into this story and uncover the profound lessons it holds. That evening, after finishing dinner, I felt the uncomfortable sensation of hot sweat soaking into my back, clinging to my skin in a way that made me restless. The day had been long, and I craved relief. So I decided a warm shower would be the perfect remedy. The bathroom, though small, had always been my little haven. And as the warm water cascaded over my tired body, it felt like gentle hands soothing away the tension. Each drop brought a sense of renewal. And for a few moments, I could let go of the day's weariness. After finishing my shower, I towel-dried my hair and reached for one of my favorite home outfits, a soft beige dress that I wore on quiet evenings. It was simple yet elegant. A V-neck design with a long zipper running down the back. The fabric was light, its texture comforting against my skin. I carried the dress into the bedroom, eager to slip into its familiarity. As I began pulling up the zipper, I encountered an unexpected problem. It got stuck halfway up, refusing to budge no matter how much I adjusted it or tugged. At first, I tried to solve it myself, twisting awkwardly to reach the stubborn zipper. But after a few futile attempts, I realized I needed help. My cheeks flushed slightly at the thought of asking for assistance with something so trivial. Looking around, I debated calling my husband, Matthew. Surely, he would lend a hand and chuckle at my predicament. I stepped into the living room, where a dim golden glow from the lamp illuminated the space. It was quiet, almost serene, and the soft hum of the clock ticking on the wall filled the air. Only my father-in-law, Anthony James, was there, sitting in his usual spot on the armchair with a cup of tea in his hand. He looked up at the sound of my footsteps, his calm expression shifting to mild surprise. "Where's Matthew, Dad?" I asked, my voice a little hesitant as I glanced around for my husband. "Matthew stepped out just a few minutes ago. I think he went to pick up something he forgot earlier. Is there anything wrong?" His tone was steady and reassuring, the kind of voice that always carried authority without being overbearing. I hesitated for a moment, biting my lip, before admitting, my zipper is stuck, and I can't get it up. Could you help me?" My voice was soft, almost embarrassed by the unusual request. Anthony set his teacup down on the table, the porcelain making a gentle clink against the wood. He rose to his feet, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "Of course. Let me take a look," he said, walking toward me. As he stood behind me, I became acutely aware of the space, or rather, the lack of it, between us. The faint warmth of his presence and the light brush of his breath on the back of my neck made me tense slightly. He examined the zipper with a focused expression, his brows furrowing as he gently tugged at it. "It looks like the fabric is caught," he muttered. His hands worked carefully, and I felt the slight pull of the zipper moving, inch by inch. Then, in a split second, something unexpected happened. There was a sudden click, and the zipper slid downward instead of upward, the tension giving way all at once. Before I could react, The soft silk of the dress slipped from my shoulders and pooled around my feet. Time seemed to freeze in that moment. I stood there, utterly stunned, as the cool breeze from the open window brushed against my bare skin. Hello, everyone. My name is Avery, and I'm 28 years old. For the past 3 years, I've been married to Matthew, the man I fell deeply in love with, a man whose kindness and steady nature have always been my anchor. On the surface, our married life appears idyllic. We live in a cozy, well-decorated home, enjoy stable careers, and have a secure financial foundation. Matthew is the epitome of a loving husband, thoughtful, patient, and unwaveringly supportive of me. I, in turn, take pride in my own accomplishments, thriving in a career that allows me to express my talents and ambitions. We share our home with Matthew's father, Anthony, a man in his late 60s who embodies strength, wisdom, and quiet dignity. To me, he is more than just a father-in-law, he is a pillar of our family. Whether it's providing guidance or mediating during disagreements, his presence has always been a source of comfort. He is the kind of man whose every word carries weight, spoken with the wisdom of years. But like any marriage, ours isn't without its challenges. The most significant point of contention has been our differing views on starting a family. Matthew dreams of the day our home will echo with the laughter of children, while I, still deeply invested in my career, feel unprepared to take on the role of motherhood. I've worked hard to reach where I am, and I want more time to chase my dreams before dedicating myself fully to raising a family. This disagreement has led to countless discussions, some calm, others heated, but through it all, our love for one another remains steadfast. Matthew has always tried to understand my perspective, and I've tried to see his. Whenever these disagreements arise, Anthony is there, offering words of wisdom. Family, he often says, is built on understanding. Give each other time, and you'll find your way. His advice has been the bridge that keeps us connected, reminding us that no matter how strong our individual convictions, love and patience can overcome all. For a long time, I believed our lives would continue in this harmonious balance, a mix of small arguments and bigger dreams. But that evening, the unremarkable moment with the zipper marked the beginning of something that would change everything. That day had started like any other. I woke earlier than usual, feeling a burst of energy to prepare breakfast for the family. Matthew loved his mornings simple, a slice of toast and a cup of freshly brewed black coffee. As for me, I treated myself to a warm glass of milk, savoring the quiet rhythm of the morning before the day's hustle began. Little did I know that this ordinary routine would give way to an evening I would never forget. Every morning, without fail, my father-in-law, Anthony, upheld a timeless ritual, sitting by the window with a steaming cup of tea in one hand and the newspaper neatly folded in the other. His presence brought an air of serenity to the household. The rustle of turning pages mingled with the soft clinking of utensils from the kitchen, creating a symphony of domestic peace. The warmth of the morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, bathing the room in a golden glow. It was a small yet significant reminder of how comforting the mundane could be. After breakfast, I hurried to prepare for the day ahead. My job wasn't overly stressful, but it demanded precision and focus. Dressing professionally always gave me a confidence boost. That day, I opted for a crisp white blouse tucked into tailored trousers, paired with understated high heels. These little rituals of self-care were like armor, equipping me to face whatever the day had in store. On the way to work, I stopped at my favorite coffee shop to grab a latte. The barista, recognizing me, greeted me with a cheerful smile. That warm exchange, along with the first sip of creamy coffee, felt like a small luxury, a reward before the grind began. The office was abuzz with activity, even more so than usual. Meetings came in rapid succession, leaving little room to breathe. I waded through a sea of emails and reports, my fingers dancing across the keyboard as I tried to stay on top of the workload. Despite the demands, I maintained an optimistic outlook. This job, with all its challenges, was more than just a paycheck, it was my passion. Each completed task brought a quiet sense of accomplishment, reminding me why I had chosen this path. As the clock struck 5 p.m., I packed my things, grateful to step away from the relentless pace of the day. The evening sunlight greeted me warmly as I stepped outside. It painted the cityscape in shades of amber and crimson, its gentle touch dissolving the tension in my shoulders. On my way home, I stopped by the supermarket to pick up some fresh ingredients. That night, I wanted to prepare a special dinner, a heartfelt effort to create a moment of togetherness amidst our busy lives. When I arrived home, the house was filled with the comforting hum of family life. I wasted no time heading to the kitchen, where I began to chop vegetables and marinate salmon. The aroma of sizzling garlic and herbs soon filled the air. Matthew returned just in time to help set the table, his warm smile adding to the sense of camaraderie. We served steaming chicken soup, perfectly grilled salmon, and a medley of stir-fried vegetables. My father-in-law emerged from his study, his face lighting up at the sight of the feast. Dinner was a tapestry of laughter, light-hearted conversations, and shared stories, even as lingering tensions about starting a family hovered in the background. These meals reminded me of what truly mattered. They were a sanctuary, a space where differences could be set aside, even if only temporarily. After dinner, I decided to take a shower to unwind. The cool water cascading over my skin was like a balm, washing away the day's exhaustion. Feeling refreshed, I reached for my favorite cream-colored silk dress, a garment that had always made me feel elegant and comfortable. As I stood before the mirror, I realized the zipper was stuck halfway. I tugged at it gently, but it refused to budge. Frustrated but determined, I stepped out into the living room, hoping Matthew could help. To my surprise, the room was empty. "Matthew, where are you?" I called out. There was no response. Anthony, seated in his usual chair with a book in hand, looked up. Matthew stepped out for a while. "What's the matter?" he asked in his calm, measured tone. I hesitated, embarrassed, but eventually confessed. "My dress zipper is stuck. I can't get it up. Could you help me?" He set the book aside and rose to his feet. "Let me take a look," he offered, his voice steady. I turned away, allowing him access to the troublesome zipper. His hand, firm yet careful, grasped the zipper. "It's caught on the fabric," he observed, tugging gently. With a sudden motion, the zipper freed itself. But to my horror, the delicate silk slipped down, leaving me frozen in place. An awkward silence descended. My heart raced, panic flooding my veins. Anthony immediately turned his gaze away, his voice tinged with regret. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for that to happen," he said hurriedly. I scrambled to pull the dress back up, my hands trembling. "It's okay," Dad. I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. The dress is just loose. I avoided eye contact, the weight of embarrassment pressing down on me. He stepped back, visibly flustered. Fix it yourself. Wait for Matthew to return, he said abruptly before retreating from the room. I stood there, my emotions a whirlwind of confusion and shame. The once cozy atmosphere of the house now felt stifling, the weight of the moment hanging heavily in the air. That night, I couldn't shake the memory of his apologetic gaze. It replayed in my mind, filling me with unease. I wondered what he was thinking and whether this incident had affected him as deeply as it had me. Despite my efforts to push the thoughts aside, they lingered, casting a shadow over the tranquility of the evening. Matthew came home late that evening, his demeanor so carefree and joyful that it almost felt as if he were completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. His laughter filled the room, and his casual greetings masked any indication of concern. Meanwhile, I sat there, struggling to maintain composure, my restlessness practically radiating from me. I tried to smile, to respond to his chatter as if everything were normal. But inside, I was drowning in a sea of confusion and unease. The effort to conceal my turmoil felt heavier with each passing second. In the days that followed, I began noticing subtle changes in Mr. John. Once a man of natural ease and light-hearted conversation, he now carried an unfamiliar tension. His demeanor shifted, he no longer spoke to me with the same warmth and spontaneity. Whenever our paths crossed in the house, his eyes would dart away, avoiding mine as if there were a barrier that neither of us dared to breach. The weight of his avoidance gnawed at me, leaving me with a persistent sense of unease. I wanted to confront it, to bridge the growing gap. But words failed me. How does one unravel a silence so profound? Still, there were moments that unnerved me more than the avoidance, moments when I caught him looking at me. His gaze wasn't casual or fleeting, it was deliberate, searching, as if he were trying to uncover some hidden truth. Each time, I quickly looked away, forcing myself to remain composed even as my heart raced and questions swirled in my mind. What was he thinking? What could possibly explain the intensity in his eyes? The more I tried to rationalize it, the more my anxiety grew. And I found myself hoping, praying, that time would wash away these invisible fractures in our fragile equilibrium. But time, as it turned out, had other plans. One morning, I woke feeling unusually tired. My body ached, my throat felt raw, and my head throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. A quick temperature check confirmed my suspicions. I had a mild fever. Matthew had already left for work, leaving the house quiet except for the faint rustling of activity from Mr. John's study. True to his routine, he was likely immersed in his books or newspapers, oblivious to my condition. I tried to rest, lying in bed for what felt like hours. But the oppressive heat of the room made it impossible to relax. The discomfort eventually pushed me to get up, seeking the cooler air of the living room. Dressed in simple pajamas, my fever-flushed face pale, and my hair cascading loosely around my shoulders, I made my way out. As I entered the living room, I found Mr. John seated on the sofa, his eyes fixed intently on the glowing screen of his phone. "Good morning," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, his gaze meeting mine, but he didn't return my greeting. His expression was unreadable, and there was something unfamiliar in his eyes, an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "Are you feeling unwell?" he asked after a moment. His voice deeper and more deliberate than usual. "Yes," I replied, forcing a faint smile. "I have a little fever. So I decided to take the day off." He nodded, acknowledging my words. But his eyes remained fixed on me, studying me in a way that made my skin crawl. There was something unsettling in his prolonged stare. A weight that pressed down on me and made the air feel heavier with every passing second. I shifted uncomfortably, my instinct urging me to leave. "I think I'll step outside for a bit," I said, turning toward the door. But before I could take another step, his voice stopped me. "Avery." "Wait," he called out, his tone firm yet laced with an undercurrent of urgency. "Come here. I need to talk to you." I froze, my heart hammering in my chest as I turned to face him. His eyes bore into mine with a strange determination. And the atmosphere in the room shifted, thickened. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach as he stood, his posture commanding, his expression unwavering. "Avery," he began, his voice low but resonant. "You are so beautiful." The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting, each syllable sinking into me like a blade. My breath caught, and a cold chill swept over me. "Dad, what are you saying?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling as a surge of disbelief washed over me. My legs felt weak, threatening to buckle under the weight of his declaration. He took a step closer, and the room seemed to shrink around me. His gaze remained locked on mine, unwavering, intense, and filled with an emotion I couldn't comprehend but instinctively feared. "Avery," he said again, his voice soft yet unrelenting. "Can you let me see you again?" For a moment, time stood still. My mind raced, grasping for any explanation, any way to interpret his words differently. But his expression left no room for misinterpretation. The seriousness in his eyes was undeniable, and it rendered me speechless. My heart pounded wildly, my palms damp with sweat as I stood there, caught in a moment that felt both surreal and terrifying. "Dad!" I almost shouted, my voice wavering as I fought to maintain my composure. "How could you say such things? Don't you feel any remorse for Matthew?" He froze, his expression clouded with confusion. Though his eyes never wavered from mine, they bore into me, searching for something, understanding, forgiveness, or perhaps a reprieve. "Avery," he finally said, his voice soft and strained, as if each word cost him dearly. "I don't know what's happening to me." His tone shifted, becoming almost desperate. "Since that day, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you." I instinctively stepped back, putting more distance between us, though my trembling legs threatened to give way. My voice, though steady, was cold with disbelief. "Dad, what you said is unforgivable. You're not just hurting me, you're tearing this family apart. I am your daughter-in-law." "I know," he interrupted, his voice rising sharply before softening, a tremor betraying his inner turmoil. "I know, Avery. But this feeling," he paused, pressing a hand to his chest as if trying to contain the storm raging within. "I can't control it." The room seemed to contract around us, the silence heavier than words could convey. Anger and sorrow tangled in my chest, threatening to choke me. "Dad!" I screamed, my voice cracking with a rawness I didn't know I possessed. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, and my eyes burned with unshed tears. Stop. I don't want to hear this anymore. I can't even comprehend how you could think, much less say, such things. Do you realize what you're doing? He stood still, his gaze dropping to the floor. His hands hung limp by his sides. His entire form weighted down by something unseen but unrelenting. The minutes stretched endlessly as he fought an invisible battle. His breathing shallow and uneven. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper, trembling under the strain. "Avery," he said, raising his eyes to meet mine again, their depths filled with anguish. "I don't know why things have turned out like this. I wish I could tell you it isn't true. I wish I could lie to myself. But I can't anymore." My breath hitched, panic and confusion coiling tighter within me. The walls of the room seemed to press inward, suffocating me with the weight of his words. My instincts screamed at me to move, to flee. Yet my legs felt as if they were rooted to the ground. He took a step forward, slow and deliberate, his presence commanding the space between us. There was something haunting in his gaze, a conflict, a sadness that defied explanation. "Stop," I managed to choke out, taking a shaky step back, only to find the edge of the small table pressing into my spine. My escape was cut off. "I know this is wrong," he said again, quieter now, his voice carrying an almost unbearable sincerity. "Every part of me knows it. But this feeling," he broke off, his eyes glistening with emotion, "it terrifies me. I don't want to hurt you, Avery. But I can't stop thinking about you. Not since that day. It's like something inside me changed. And I don't know how to make it stop." The weight of his confession crashed over me, leaving me breathless. The world around us seemed to blur and fade, reduced to the unbearable tension between his unspoken longing and my growing dread. In that moment, we were trapped, both of us prisoners to a truth neither of us wanted to confront. My heart thundered so violently in my chest that it felt as though it might shatter at any moment. Each beat was deafening, each second stretching into an eternity as the weight of what was happening sank in. "Dad, do you even understand what you're saying?" I shouted, my voice cracking under the strain of overwhelming emotion. "We can't do this. It's not right. It'll ruin everything." My words echoed in the tense air, trembling with desperation. He stopped just a few feet away, his eyes locking onto mine. Pain radiated from him, raw and unshielded, cutting through the distance between us. "I know, Avery," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "I know it all too well. But I also know there's no turning back. You feel it too, don't you?" His words were a blade, slicing through the fragile wall I'd built in my mind. I shook my head violently, trying to deny it, to refute the truth hanging in the air. Yet, even as my mind screamed its rejection, my body betrayed me. My limbs froze, my throat tightened. His eyes searched mine, pleading not for compliance but for understanding, for acknowledgement of the helplessness that bound us both. The room seemed to dissolve into a hazy blur. The walls melted away, and every sound faded until the silence was deafening. When he took a single step forward, it felt as though the chasm that should have separated us vanished. I didn't move. I didn't pull away. Invisible boundaries dissolved as though they'd never existed, leaving nothing but an unbearable closeness that defied everything I thought I knew. When it was over, I collapsed into a chair, trembling uncontrollably. My hands, My legs. Even my breath seemed beyond my control. The thundering of my heart hadn't subsided. But now it wasn't conflict fueling it, it was sheer terror. What had we done? How had we let it come to this? Mr. John stood before me. His face pale. His eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on us both, suffocating in its intensity. "Avery," he began. His voice barely more than a whisper. It trembled, cracking under the burden of emotions too complex to name. "No," I interrupted sharply, my own voice wavering. "Don't say anything. Please. Don't." I forced myself to stand, though my legs felt like they might give out beneath me at any moment. The distance to the door seemed impossibly vast. But I moved, one agonizing step at a time. When my fingers wrapped around the doorknob, his voice reached me again, heavy with anguish. "Avery. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I opened the door and slipped out, each step away from that room feeling like a lifetime. The guilt, the confusion, the sheer weight of what had transpired crushed me. How could I face myself? How could I face Matthew? How could I face John? That night, sleep was a distant impossibility. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as images and fragments of the day's events replayed in an endless loop. Every word, every glance, every fleeting moment was a torment. My mind churned with unanswerable questions. How had it come to this? How had I allowed myself to lose control so completely? And most pressing of all, how could we possibly move forward from here? The days that followed were a blur of torment and pretense. Every moment was a battle to suppress the storm raging within me. The thought of telling Matthew the truth gnawed at my conscience. But every time I even considered it, I felt paralyzed. What would he think? What would he do? I knew that if Matthew ever found out, it would destroy him. It would shatter the sacred bond between him and my father, a bond that could never be mended. I couldn't bear the thought of being the one to break it. And so, I buried it all. The pain, the guilt, the suffocating weight of my secret. I forced myself to smile, to laugh, to pretend that everything was normal. Each morning, I made breakfast as though the world hadn't crumbled around me. I cleaned the house, humming softly to disguise the chaos inside me. I greeted Matthew with warmth, determined that he wouldn't suspect a thing. But behind that facade, I was unraveling. Eventually, I realized there was only one solution. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't live under the same roof, surrounded by constant reminders of what had happened. If I stayed, the fragile threads holding this family together would snap. Leaving was the only way to protect them. The only way to keep the truth from surfacing and destroying everything. I began making plans in secret. Each step felt like walking a tightrope, the fear of discovery ever present. But I kept my resolve, masking my intentions with practiced ease. As I packed my things late at night, I told myself it was for the best. I told myself that leaving was an act of love, a sacrifice to preserve the family I'd already jeopardized. Still, the weight of my decision was crushing. Every smile I gave Matthew felt like a betrayal. Every kind word felt hollow. But I couldn't let him see the cracks. I couldn't let him know how deeply broken I'd become. And so, I smiled and I lied, all while counting down the days until I could escape. In the quiet of my room, I whispered a silent apology to Matthew. To John, to myself. I didn't know if I could ever find forgiveness, from them or within myself. But as the days passed, one thing became clear: the only way to protect what little remained was to walk away. One quiet evening, after dinner, the family gathered in the living room. The warm glow of the fireplace casting soft, dancing shadows on the walls. I sat there, heart pounding, waiting for the right moment to speak. My hands trembled slightly as I clutched the edge of the couch. Finally, I took a deep breath, summoning the courage to break the silence. Matthew, I began softly, my voice barely above a whisper. I need to talk to you about something important. He looked up immediately, his eyes full of concern and curiosity. What is it? Avery, is everything okay? You seem troubled. I hesitated, searching for the right words to express the turmoil in my heart. I've been thinking, I said, trying to steady my voice. Maybe it's time for us to move on. To start over somewhere new. I feel like it would be good for us, both of us. His expression shifted from concern to confusion. Move? Why? What brought this on? We've been fine here, haven't we? What's really going on? Avery. I attempted a reassuring smile, but it faltered. It's not about anything being wrong, per se. It's just that I feel we need some space. A fresh start. Sometimes staying in one place can hold us back. Matthew reached out and placed a hand gently on my shoulder, his eyes searching mine. Avery, he said, his tone serious but kind. I know you. There's more to this than you're letting on. Please, tell me what's bothering you. You don't have to face it alone. Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps descending the staircase interrupted us. John appeared, his face calm but thoughtful. He had heard everything. Avery is right, he said, his voice steady yet filled with quiet conviction. Matthew, I think it's time for you and Avery to start a life of your own. You're both young, and you need the freedom to grow and build something for yourselves. I don't want to hold you back. Matthew's gaze shifted to his father, a mixture of surprise and reluctance flashing across his face. But, Dad, I don't want to leave you. We've always been here, together. I don't see why we have to change that. John smiled faintly, his hand resting firmly on Matthew's shoulder. Son, I'll be fine. This isn't about me. It's about you and Avery. Staying here might seem comfortable, but it's not always what's best. You need to step out into the world and carve out your own path. I'll always be here for you, no matter where you go. Matthew's resistance softened, though it took a moment for him to nod. His eyes glistened with a hint of unshed tears, but he managed a small smile. If you believe this is the right thing, Dad, then I'll trust you. But promise me I can visit often. John chuckled, pulling Matthew into a brief hug. Of course. Son. This isn't goodbye, it's just the next chapter. I stayed silent, bowing my head as an overwhelming mixture of emotions welled up inside me. Relief, sadness, guilt, and gratitude intertwined in my heart. I knew why John had supported me. This was his way of making amends, of ensuring that our fractured bonds didn't completely shatter. Later that night, as the house grew quiet, I stood by my bedroom window, staring out at the moonlit yard. The weight of our decision pressed heavily on my chest. Leaving felt like the right choice. But the shadows of pain and guilt would undoubtedly follow me. This home held so many memories, some beautiful, some haunting. And yet, it was time to leave them behind. As I reflected on the journey that brought us here, one undeniable truth crystallized in my mind: mistakes often begin with seemingly small missteps. Moments of weakness or thoughtlessness that spiral into something far greater than we ever anticipated. None of us are perfect. But true strength lies in recognizing our failings, owning up to them, and striving to make things right. Family is a sanctuary, but it is also a delicate thread of trust and responsibility. One wrong move, one careless decision, can unravel years of love and effort. It is essential to cherish the bonds we share and guard them with vigilance. Temptations and emotions can cloud our judgment, but staying mindful of our values is what keeps us grounded. For those who find themselves in similar circumstances, my advice is simple yet profound: choose the path that causes the least harm. Sometimes, leaving isn't an act of running away, it's an act of protection, of preserving what matters most. Letting go is not a sign of weakness, it's a gift we give ourselves and those we love. A chance to hold on to what truly counts. When I finally left that house, I carried with me a deep sense of loss, but also a renewed commitment to live with integrity. Life is a winding road, filled with trials and lessons. And this experience marked a turning point in my journey. I vowed never to stray from the values that define me. Never to let a fleeting moment of weakness jeopardize the things I hold dear. To anyone who has listened to my story, I offer this: take these lessons to heart. Value your family. Honor your responsibilities. And never underestimate the power of a single decision to shape your life. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our latest and most exciting videos. Your support is the greatest motivation for us to keep creating valuable content. See you in the next video.